Danny. I'm a former fellow of Kernel, and now I guess one of the co-leads for the DeFi Guild. In my day job, I'm a management strategy consultant, and very very interested and keen and eager on about DeFi. I'm gonna give it over to Greg.
Sure. Greg Bateman, co-founder of Window Finance. Window Finance was a project that was born out of Kernel Block 4. We are an investment platform for sophisticated investors to reduce their risks in DeFi investing. I just wanted to say that Kernel was a really critical part to this project I'm working on, but also my transition into Web3. I founded a handful of startups before, but certainly you have to kind of do everything anew in Web3. So Kernel's been really, really helpful for that. So I would love to pass it to my friend Gabriel.
Yeah, my name's Gabriel. So I was part of the previous cohort, so KB5, I guess. And I'm also a founder, but of Deep Balancer. And my startup is looking for applying deep learning investment strategies into DeFi and crypto in general. So also really keen on this conversation then. Julian, why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure. So I'm Julian. I'm the founder of Swivel, where we take yield-bearing deposits on various money markets and staking protocols across DeFi and allow you to split them up and effectively create primarily fixed yields. As far as I was the participant in the first block ever. So I'd like to think of myself as like Kernel to the core. And pretty much ever since then, I've been helping. And as DeFi Alliance was unable to helping out as their own organization expanded, I ended up taking up the majority of the roles around, and thankfully we've got a lot more help this time. So yeah, just really happy to continue contributing and talk to you guys about what Kernel can offer. So from there, Drew, sorry. Yeah.
Thanks, Julian. So my name is Drew. I am based in Paris. My specialty is for a full day job working as developer relations for a startup named dBond. We are trying to onboard financial derivatives and bonds on chain. And for that, I have co-authored the standard ERC 3475. And in free time, I am passionate reading about the latest developments in DeFi space and trying to merge with the philosophical standpoint of Kernel. Also to let you know that I joined Kernel Block 3 that really influenced me to contribute more towards the idea of public goods, developing services that will reach to next billion users in their daily lives. And yeah, I'm passionate to help people develop their solutions on Web3 and happy to join this initiative. Thanks.
And I think I wrap up. I'm Shawn Dimantha. I'm the Kernel DeFi Podcast host, also with the DeFi Guild, founding team member at Hydra Ventures DAO, the world's first investment DAO fund of funds, and really excited to talk all things DeFi today. So before we start off into what we're doing in the DeFi Guild, I'd love it if Danny could explain what Kernel is to a deeper degree. Hey, Danny, you're on mute.
Of course. Yeah, no, it's really cool to have the opportunity to introduce Kernel. It's really, clearly it's had an impact, I think, on all of our journeys and transition into Web3. But at its core, right, I would say Kernel is just that. It's a community centered around an 8-week fellowship, right? Focused on Web3 and bringing, different builders, the ever curious in the space, whether it be from DAOs to DeFi, games, NFTs, culture, right? It really is as a 8-week fellowship. And then once you go through that opportunity, you have the chance to kind of come back and serve in a variety of different capacities as a mentor. Julian, you talked about that. Guild leads, as well as individual's guide, be as a guide to the program as well. I think what makes really Kernel so special is that it really does accept and attract, I'd say, the brightest and the most curious, whether they be in Web 2, not even in Web 2, but or already in Web 3, and it really kind of focuses on establishing that sense of culture that's focused around trust. So it's a really special place, and beautiful. Be curious about, for some of those on the call here, if there's anything y'all want to add, or maybe even an example of a Kernel experience.
Sure. I mean, I think something that really needs to be discussed when you think about Kernel is that there are other, honestly, in Web3, but generally speaking, other accelerators around if you're trying to take the next step into a given industry and gain legitimacy, etc. And for the most part, what they want to in your projects and equity in you, essentially, right? They trained you and they want something for it. Kernel is different, right? Kernel wants to grow the ecosystem and wants to contribute to you, right? And this is very different. It bubbles through exactly how the cohort operates, through the people we have on, and really everything that goes on, right? The bottom line is that when you come to Kernel, you're a contributor to this greater ecosystem. And as a contributor, you get all the benefits and just all of the community that comes with it. I suppose I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, the only thing I'll add is, like, I feel like it's a great place to find your way, no matter how far you are in your crypto journey. I think the language we use around the mentors in our program guides is quite literal. We help individuals find their way within Web3, whether they're just starting off or super advanced. So it's definitely has been a transformative experience to me as a fellow, as others have mentioned. Now we also have this DeFi guild thing, right? So what is this DeFi guild? Anyone want to take a stab at that? I we have a new tagline.
Yeah,
redefining together. Is that correct?
Gabriel, I think.
Hey, Gabriel, you want to
Yeah, there we go. So I'll just kind of get that started there. I think, right, when we kind of mentioned this, or I mentioned this earlier, right, where Kernel has it attracts a variety of different individuals all across Web3, if they're even, regardless of where they are on that journey. Within that, right, Kernel has organized guilds, right, kind of around some of those topics. So clearly there's a DeFi guild, but in addition to that, there's also, NFTs, culture, DAOs, even looking at layer 2s. There's a variety of different ones. I think about 6 or 7 in this current block, and the number can change. But we as a DeFi guild have been really focused on helping builders and individuals who are curious about decentralized finance, or DeFi, right? I think it's kind of self-explanatory, but we're really kind of helping focus on understanding the systems, right, and the infrastructure that is at its core DeFi, and even look at some of the intersection of how, I guess, decentralized finance connects to some of those other pieces, right? When we think about DAOs, it's kind of hard to completely separate DeFi because it is so intrinsic to sorry, Gabriel, I think you're coming in hot there. There we go.
Apologies. Yeah.
All good. It's all good. So yeah, I think we're really kind of focused on that, and within it, I think we've this at least guild. One thing that we're really excited about is I think we have 3 kind of distinct work streams, for lack of maybe a better word, right? There's Julian, and I'd love for you to kind of talk about this in the build track, and really kind of getting the chance to build with an entrepreneur, 2 sets of entrepreneurs, Gabriel and Julian, right? And I'll let y'all kind of talk about it, but actually building something in DeFi and getting into the mechanics of it and getting to work with 2 people who I think, have been around the block and know what they're doing. As well as that, there's a project I'm kind of, I guess, leading, or in my head, which is really about trying to document some of not only the basic stuff, and not to say that DeFi is elementary, because it's complex, but right, to document that stuff and to your point, Shawn, earlier, like help onboard people into DeFi and kind of nerd out on this stuff and allow, we're kind of seeking contributors to help build that knowledge base. And of course, not only that entry point, but also some of the more nuanced topics that we talk about, right? That are relevant to not only an investor, but a builder as well. And then lastly, the podcast, right, Shawn, which you lead as well. So I feel like I've gone on I've kind of talked a little bit too much here. So Shawn or Julian, Gabriel, love y'all. Greg.
Greg, you want to chime in? Right? Or Julian?
Yeah, just one thing I think that was really, I think we were able to do well last time, and this time it's going to be 10 times better, is touch upon these different areas of building a DeFi project or even investing in DeFi project, because it's not just about the code. You have to think about, security. You have to think about tokenomics. You have to think about the legal aspects. And so I think we're doing a really good job of covering various different areas and showing how those connect. Because, some people might come in expert in one area, but probably not all the areas we touch upon. And some people will come in just wanting to learn about everything. So I think that's one thing that I'm excited about for this time around.
Drew, do you want to say anything about, I guess, the DeFi Guild before I hop in, I suppose?
Yeah, sure. So in my understanding, currently people face a lack of, let's say, learning. They try to understand the interfaces to the already, mature protocols like Aave, or understanding the yield strategy and trying to understand whole like returns, APYs. In the experimental phase, like last 2 years, you have seen immense like contribution, seeing super high APYs. So I think eventually, in order to right now, it's the time of stabilization and seeing the utility aspect of this financial primitive, and how we can make a stable, let's say, economy which will be funding public goods, real world use cases, or DeSci, or amazing, let's say, other communities in the Web3 space. So I think, for me, this really adds a value.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's, like you're saying, there is a massive gap between, especially if you don't have people in the industry you can just work alongside with. You can't really get started other than doing it all yourself, right? And the DeFi Guild in the past, I mean, has made attempts to make sure that you're able to build alongside people. So I mean, I'll speak a little bit about our program. We are doing a more guided project alongside the entire cohort this time. But more generally, I think one of the great things about Kernel, and then specifically about the DeFi Guild, is that with all of the resources available and kind of the way that we've built things, you really just get out whatever you want to get, right? My first time around in Block Zero, there was not as much infrastructure. There was still the potential to do all of the same things, however. And I'm going to be honest, I did not take advantage of them. That said, that was what was right for me, right? I was a founder. I didn't have enough time necessarily at the time, a solo founder, to participate in everything going on. But what I did get out of the cohort was the ability to present my project to a number of very legitimate people. And for me, who, I mean, I previously played video games professionally, I played MOBAs, and I have a degree in psychology, right? This was the massive leap that I needed to make sure that people believed that my project was legitimate, right? Of course, that's not what everyone will get out of DeFi Guild. Everyone gets out different things. And, this time around, we're having on a bunch of great guests. I think that's something we're specifically talking about later on. I'm actually really, really happy with the group of people that we've established. And then specifically, right, on this topic of building, for people that don't have an idea of what they'd like to do, we'd like to provide a route for participation and with the most minimal amount of friction, right? So this time around, we're going to be building a project called Bondable. Step one is figuring out a better name. And throughout the cohort, effectively developing a concept that we've already built into something that is more fleshed out and actually tangible. The end result hopefully being infrastructure that is a public good, and can be used to fund open source organizations in a more sustainable manner than we currently have. So yeah, I'll leave it at that, I suppose, if anyone else wants to take off from there.
Yeah, I wonder if we get into like why fellows should join the DeFi Guild as well. And I think you articulated some of those reasons, Julian.
Yeah.
I can share like some of my own personal reasons about why I joined the DeFi Guild when I was a fellow. I always had found DeFi to be a topic of interest, but something that was relatively unapproachable, especially for an outsider. And I found that the sessions with the fireside speakers, many who we are repeating this fellowship in the past fellowship that I was part of, actually had a gift for breaking down concepts into very tangible building blocks. Quite literally, Dan Robinson gave us a presentation on the simple machines of DeFi. And I think that was really empowering to see that we also had a cohort of fellows who were empowered, like Ali, like Nick, like others, to run their own, what we call juntos, basically small little study groups to go over, for example, Lisa J.Y. Tan's book on tokenomics. And we actually are bringing her back as a fireside speaker this fellowship. So all sorts of opportunities to contribute and grow the Kernel Fellowship in terms of the opportunity to learn, grow your knowledge base, as well as contribute back. So I thought that was what was exciting about the DeFi Guild. Greg, seems like you wanted to add something.
Yeah, I did just something really small because, on my journey, even before Kernel, of course, I was listening to podcasts and watching YouTube and whatever. What I found really, really refreshing about the speakers we had on was how they just told it like it was, like no filter. It was like a group of trusted friends. Even the legal stuff we're getting into, it's like, this is what you should do, but this is what you can do. This type of discussion was really helpful. I just wanted to highlight that.
Yeah, I think just like specifically touching on some of them, right? There is an issue in getting real thought leadership within the space because there just aren't many thought leaders. Okay, like how can you really feel accurate about your own assessments if they've been completely self-founded, and the 15 people that really get it are all at the best VCs or founding a project already, right? And even for us, we're extremely happy to grab the time with these folks that, like Shawn was saying, can properly break things down and understand everything on a more fundamental basis, right? On the legal side, it's legal has gotten more and more expensive over the course of the year, but and I'm sure we'll touch on exactly who we're having on, but generally speaking, getting an hour of solid legal advice like you're going to get out of the Kernel Guild would probably cost you a couple $1,000s. So, I mean, that's just upfront one of the biggest things I see.
So quickly adding point to the Julian thought. Also, the thought leadership is very varied. For instance, you have in traditional finance leaders across macroeconomic and microeconomic space, but in blockchain space, it's much more libertarian aspects that are much more sounded often, and that kind of adds little bit friction to their bigger use case adoption. So kind of like having a middle way so that thought leaders from both aspects can discuss and then come to a conclusion to how to develop this space while conforming to the current reality in regulation space or anywhere. It will be a great way to also teach other folks who are not very much into this mindset of Web3. Yeah, so I think that would be the real add-on for this.
Awesome. So why don't we get into? I'm going to actually share my screen and share the build project. And Julian and Gabriel, I don't know if you want to talk to that. I think that could be a really interesting, just to talk a little bit more about the stuff we have planned for the build specific aspect of kernel.
Sure. So really, this started as as just a random project I did over Christmas last winter because I don't have friends, I suppose. So the idea was initially just,
Hey, Julian, we're your friends, right?
yeah, exactly. Well, I shared it with you guys eventually. Is that there's this strange expectation when you come to Gitcoin and donate that you are going to potentially get an airdrop, right? And in a couple of the previous rounds, that was very clearly where a lot of the donations actually came from. You can take that as a good thing or a bad thing because people are still being donated capital. But nonetheless, it completely perverted the incentives. And as a founder, for the first 3 months after we did an airdrop and for all of the months preceding it, we were constantly asked about when it was and essentially given this clear expectation that, hey, I donated to your Gitcoin. Where's my equity in your project? Which, like, that's not how that works, right? So my goal was to try to come up with an idea or just like a proposal that would reduce this expectation or at least make it more explicit. So we ended up with a project named Bondable, where users are able to come in and offer some certain amount of debt, right? Completely unbacked with a very loose guarantee that they're ever going to return you your money rather. So it's much like a donation. However, you actually get something back for it. You get an IOU and there's something to track and a proper structure already in place for the people that you donate money to give it back to you. Right. So that's like the goal of the project. And I'm hoping to have a lot of the kernel cohort participants this time around, or fellows, I suppose, really grasp onto this idea and try to make it their own. Right. I tried to make the contract as minimal as possible. We have a minimalist front end available that Gabriel contributed significantly to. I mean, I'll give him some room to talk about that and his plans there. And really, at the end of the day, we can make this as interesting or as plain as the cohort ends up wanting to, right? So we'll be starting with the first conversation surrounding everything DeFi and fundamentals to kind of talk about really like, okay, where does the yield come from? And after that, ending up with a variety of interesting implementation topics, from just actually doing in Solidity to everything on the front end and the graph and pretty much everything that you guys might end up wanting to build a project. Yeah, Gabriel, do you want to just touch on the front end at all?
Sure. Can you guys hear me well?
Yeah,
Yep.
good enough.
Great.
Yeah. The front end, as Julian said, is very minimalistic. So it's based off, it was forked from the ETH scaffold project, which should come familiar to some people that already saw some other normal front ends. And yeah, as described before, it's more thought that extend this front end and use that as basis for future projects. And also feel free to suggest any improvements and build with us and making this project a lot better, both from the contract side and also from the front end side. And in the front end is a normal React project that is seen across many projects in crypto. So help and additional things very much appreciated.
Yeah, and I think like the one thing to highlight is that we're trying to structure this in a way that aligns with the general ethos of kernel, in that, if you say that you want to come and help us, there's really no expectation. With this, the project ends up being as advanced or as basic as the participants end up wanting to make it. And that really creates a low stress environment for guided learning and just like a walkthrough of, hey, I don't have a project of my own. I would still like to either contribute or learn how people actually make it and what's in the sauce. So yeah, I don't know. I think that's a nice conclusion of that. If you really want to learn what's in the sauce, then come participate.
Coming up, we have the and kicking it off, we have Dan Robinson. Julian, do you want to talk a little bit about our first speaker? He's coming on next week.
Sure. So this is actually a presentation that he's done a few times. I first heard it as a participant in I want to say it was the second DeFi Alliance cohort. And at the time, I think he just called it AMMs are everything, or everything is an AMM, which is a really strange concept, but like something that you'd expect Dan to say, right? Last time as well, he came on, he cracked a beer with us, hung out for a long time. And really, I feel like a lot of the insight that he can provide is extremely necessary for people that are coming and entering the space, right? Truly understanding how something like Compound could be an AMM, and how the mechanisms behind all of these protocols really are very similar with very slightly different implementations, right? Or combinations of different concepts. These are fun topics for me. Hopefully they are for everybody else. But yeah, I guess background on Dan, you can kind of see it on the screen, but he's been at Paradigm for a while. Previous to that, he was an attorney, and it's actually funny. A lot of the guys at Paradigm knew each other from that point in time. And at this point, I think everyone really knows him for Twitter, if anything. So, really happy to have him on. There it is. There's the Twitter.
Yeah, I really love Dan's presentation. I mean, not just because he was able to really simplify kind of this crazy monkey brain complexity that was in my mind about different DeFi projects, but also because by understanding how he views the world, it helps even investors or kind of more passive participants in the DeFi space understand what risks they're getting into. Because if you can't really understand what's going on, then it's easy to get screwed. So I thought, from multiple perspectives, from a builder perspective, from a risk perspective, from an investor perspective, his talk was really, really great.
Yeah, completely agree. I mean, there's very few people, I think, really that have at least these more fundamental presentations prepared that really don't show their own portfolio companies, that really present the concepts properly, and in a way that is like you're saying, down to earth, and allows our cohort to properly ask questions, right? I think that should be something that we do mention that hasn't been so far, is a lot of these sessions will be significantly conversational based, right? So everyone in the cohort can come and ask questions they'd like, participate in the conversation, and in general, just like get to speak their mind. It's a big benefit to just be able to specifically get into these things and kind of conjugate, I think is the right word. Yeah, to think on exactly how these concepts might be able to apply for whatever you might be working on.
I love the Q&A time with Dan as well. I think to get a few spicy takes as well. Obviously, we can't repeat those here. We promised a code of silence, but I thought that was great that there was that interactivity. Going on to our next speaker, maybe I'm just going to go to Marc Boiron, who's going to talk all things legal. And Julian, I don't know if you mind introducing him as well.
Sure. Yeah, Marc was he was our legal counsel at Swivel initially for our seed round, which I think was probably overkill at the time, and I didn't realize it. Maybe not, because he really helped us set out our standards and the basis for our organization and how we look at our legal position. So Marc previously he worked at a few firms. The one that he was working at the time was Manat. And very quickly, I mean, he is one of the most skilled, if not the most skilled, attorney in DeFi or counsel in DeFi. So he was quickly picked up by DYDX. I don't want to speculate on why he left DYDX, because they've had a lot of stuff going on recently about their positioning. But as of late, yeah, he recently left DYDX, works at Polygon. And as I mentioned earlier, I think he's probably, at least in terms of monetary value, the most valuable person that we have on. It does cost, $1,200 to get at least like a decent DeFi. Maybe I'm talking shit and I shouldn't, but for people that are relatively well known and you can be confident are a good DeFi lawyer, it's going to cost $1,200 an hour. For Marc, it's probably 2,000 plus, right? And a question that pops up every single cohort, and we've had Marc on, I want to say 2 to 3 times already. It is, where can I go to get legal counsel that isn't that expensive? I think it was actually Danny that asked this question. Maybe I'm wrong. And the answer is that it isn't really out there, right? Especially if you're international. I think Greg was having a lot of issues internationally. There's not really a good source for this. So unless you are funded already, or you're prepared to drop, 15K on your lawyer for your seed round, and the additional cost, really depending on your project, to kind of consider your positioning, you need some initial insight. So what we really hope to provide our fellows is some minimal confidence that they aren't actually in trouble, and to really push forward with their projects. At least that's how I look at it. I guess, yeah, Greg, yeah, you kind of get to talk on how useful it is.
One tip on this session is, come with your questions. I mean, for all sessions, but this specific one, like, what's that one thing that's really keeping you up at night? This liability, this worry that I'm going to be one of the Tornado Cash developers, whatever that is. Bring your question. I think that'll be a great chance to get it answered.
Great. Yeah, I just want to second that. I just want to second that. Yeah, sorry, Shawn.
Yeah, I was just going to move us on to our third speaker. I believe he might be our second speaker in the lineup, is Guillaume Lambert. He is a professor of applied physics at Cornell, but I know he's focused on all things DeFi. Anyone want to give a quick intro on Guillaume? I'm
believe... a fanboy, I guess.
Okay.
But unless anyone wants to pop in, right? Raise their hand. Okay. He's been doing research for a long time in the space on really the optimization of liquidity and what you're actually doing when you provide liquidity on something like Uniswap. The bottom line is that there are a number of variables that really relate to returns, etc. And then there's primarily volatility, right? And when you look at volatility, you can adjust it by adjusting fees. He's actually written some really spectacular research on how to create a constant volatility AMM with variable fees. But more recently, he's kind of honed in on the ability to use Uniswap v3 to replicate options positions. So obviously, these are all pretty advanced topics. To introduce his project is Panoptic, which is specifically that. It is a protocol that provides liquidity to Uniswap v3 and then allows you to borrow or lend these liquidity positions until some future date. Which is interesting in and of itself, because you can recreate, again, an option where, hey, if my Uniswap v3 position passes above some certain price, the same as an option passing above some certain price, you're effectively paying out the option, and it's the same thing. So it's a project I'm really excited about. And in terms of, base mechanics, it's probably the most interesting thing out there right now. So obviously really exciting stuff.
This is for all the nerds out there who are really into a lot of these market dynamics, liquidity, etc.
Hopefully there's it's broken down more than I just broke it down, right? And I assume he will. But really, there's so much to talk about within the liquidity space, and I don't think there's a single person that knows it better. So again, I think a really big pickup for the cohort.
Awesome. We also have Lisa J.Y. Tan, who I mentioned is an expert on tokenomics. She has a firm called Economics Design. She has really blown me away with the depth and breadth of her knowledge in the space. I definitely recommend checking out her book, the math and economics of token design, and we will go into everything related to tokenomics, and I believe that's going to come the first week of October is when she will be joining us. So super excited to have her on board. The fellows last time actually ran a study group, and I think that's an opportunity for fellows this time around as well to go through her book and break it down into concepts, and building off some of the work that Ali Rizvi, KB7 fellow, initiated. We also have Jack Sanford, who's the co-founder and CEO of Sherlock DeFi. He's also a Kernel alum, which is exciting to have. He focused on all things audits and security. Julian, I don't know if there's anything else you want to add there.
I mean, we're working with their company. We're getting an audit from him in a couple weeks. So that's just like the first thing that one, he's a nice guy. So that's cool too. But they came out of the cohort. And I think Jack's and Sherlock's story is interesting in that they came out of the cohort and had a very specific model for what they wanted to do, and found effectively that in order to execute on their insurance model, they needed to be the auditors themselves. And through this story, I think it identifies, I mean, hopefully their auditors and everyone within the project too, but Jack himself as essentially a domain expert on insurance and really what you need to do to properly, as an insurer, understand risk, right? For them, the bottom line was that they couldn't understand the risk until they actually did the audit itself. So, right, that's a really interesting concept. Greg, it seems like you're shaking your head. Do you have any feelings around that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm like the biggest fan of insurance in the world. It's like the most boring, but the most interesting at the same time topic. And I think this, I don't know, I just personally really want to dig into this project, understand how it works, because once we can start to insure a lot of these risks that people are getting trapped by, then I really feel the space will grow 100x. So I'm just super excited about this topic.
Yeah, and I'm sure Jack will want to. There's like there are a couple of models for audits. I think within the past month they've swapped models completely to doing a competition-based audit, which is similar to Code Arena, and I think really just Code Arena. And that there are a ton of auditors in the space that then come and compete for rewards. And I'm honestly, in general, a big fan of this shakeup in terms of audit structure. And I'm sure that it'll be really great to have Jack on to kind of discuss. I think at that point, there will be, the conclusion of the first few contests. I think we will be one of the first ones at Swivel. Actually, a new project in stealth, some alpha here called Illuminate. And again, I'm sure he'll be really happy to share how everything has gone. They're coming on, I think it's the second to last discussion. I want to say it's the 15th of October is off the top of my head. I might be wrong there.
Some sneaky alpha there. Make sure you were listening. The final speaker, who will be joined by a few others in the DeFi innovation space, is Terry Chung from 1KX. He's going to talk all things NFT finance. A few of us participated in the NFT finance hackathon, either as participants, mentors, judges. Gabriel actually was a winner, one of the winners of the NFT finance hackathon. Gabriel, anything you learned from the NFT finance space, hacking directly? I know you built a data visualization tool.
Yeah, it was a great experience. So really eye-opening for me, that I didn't really have too much overview on this, the potential for NFTs, for this deep financial applications, like options whose underlying is an NFT and things of that nature. And especially interesting was the opportunity to work with NFT Bank as part of the bounty that they had in there. And that involved using machine learning for predicting floor prices and estimate of the NFT prices, so across time and not depending only on the kind of trades executed on multiple venues. That was one of the interesting things. And overall, lots of different projects involving NFTFi and I particularly use data from SudoSwap to understand the evolution of the volume there, and also understand which trading was performed for each collection. So anyway, Shawn, you're displaying there the projects in there. So happy to also explore further.
Yeah, and I was super excited to take part as a judge. Danny and Greg also participated as mentors, so we were super excited to see all the different projects. Danny and Greg, I don't know if you had any comments as well in looking at a lot of these innovation in the space.
Yeah, I think that I'd love to kind of like talk about this experience, and also about the frame of like how we as a DeFi guild look to continue to try to like serve and connect kernel fellows with the broader DeFi community, and also like innovative opportunities such as like hackathons, right? So So MacroDAO did a really great job. Congratulations again, Gabriel. Really obviously focused on the financialization of NFTs, right? How can we use them and see them beyond maybe some of their current use cases, personal profile pictures, aka pictures of monkeys, right? Bored Apes Yacht Club, right there. But but I think like even when you extrapolate that, right, like Kernel has an entire workflow and process that allows existing hackathons, right, to be able to connect with our existing fellows and community as a whole, right? So we've been able to kind of build that infrastructure, as well as then continue, we as guild leads and even within our community look for opportunities to kind of help connect Kernel and its ethos, because again, we believe so firmly in the culture and the community that we have, that it's so important, right, as we look to collectively build Web3 and specifically as this community, right, as a sub-community within Kernel itself as a DeFi guild, right, looks to espouse the ethos of Kernel, right? And Julian, you talked about like public goods, right? But really being intentional about how we collectively build this, I don't want to say like new economy, right? Because I think it's more of an evolution of the existing economy we already have, but this economy that is going to look distinctly different, right, in 5 to 10 to 20 years because of because of what we're doing in this DeFi guild, right? And so I say all this just to kind of highlight that I think the opportunity for us, and Shawn, thank you for helping connect us to MacroDAO and the hackathon they were doing, and Gabriel, kudos to you for winning it, is right, just another, and again, Greg and I's like minor role in doing an AMA and helping mentor some really cool projects. It's just another opportunity or an example of how we as Kernel look to continue to not only serve our own community and our own interests, our values, and work with partners who are like-minded and eager and really just kind of be like a conduit, if you will. So, yeah.
All right, I think that wraps up the guild portion of what we have planned for the fellowship. We're going to transition to some market commentary, and before I do that, we have some live calling questions. So the first question was, and I'm going to pass it to any of you, is in 7 words or less, explain DeFi to a 4-year-old. Julian, I think you were trying to say something.
I was just, 7 words is a small amount of words.
This is a question
let's
from,
try to
from
be
Jose.
succinct.
Give me one.
Try to be succinct about it, but
contest.
I can't do it in 7 words. Let's do a contest.
Okay, access important financial tooling, all rather, damn it, that's 8. All rather few. Okay, that's the idea. Is it's supposed to be important financial tooling that everyone can access rather than just a few people in society. And this is a sort of messaging that I think has been lost over a few years. We need to be providing infrastructure that people need to use, right? The story of providing people in Venezuela banking and banking services that can compete with everything in the modern world is extremely important. On the other side of things, I mean, actually, I'll stop in case anyone else has another one. Actually,
all right, I'll give it an attempt. This is kind of tongue in cheek. Create your own piggy bank. If we're talking to a 4-year-old here.
So I've got a 4-year-old, or he's now 5.
I was going to say Greg is the most appropriate answer of this,
but it's not. I don't think it's a perfect one because it explains kind of crypto. It doesn't really explain everything. But anyway, so my son thinks I play video games all day. So I just basically tell him it's money for the video game world. It's internet money, and he gets it. He gets it, and he thinks his dad is cool. So at least it works for him.
Nice financial tooling.
Hard to explain. Yeah. I think it's really hard, but there's definitely not a definition I think that works for 4-year-olds. But I think decentralized finance at its core is just peer-to-peer value transfer with public and open tools, right? The idea that no longer we rely on centralized intermediaries and smart contracts at its core is just the automation of code and function, right? That effectively it's going to operate a certain way or it should operate a certain way, right? There's a reason you get a smart contract audit, because there are ways to manipulate it and do what it's not intended to. But ultimately, right, I think that's what its core is. DeFi is just the opportunity to use these public tools that are open source, typically, to transfer value with one another in a decentralized way. I don't know. I don't think any 4-year-old's going to understand any of that.
Seven words I've ever heard, but I love it. I love
it.
Yeah,
those are 7 words. I can't do it. You can't do it. Yeah.
I'd love to hear whoever posed the question. I would love to hear their version, if they have one.
Yeah, that was Boateng. I unfortunately am not able to add him to the audience, but hopefully he can respond. So I'll post all of these to our to our Twitter to see if we have any reactions here. But I think those are all great definitions.
I think I don't know. I'm just kind of riffing, so hopefully that's okay while you're doing Twitter stuff. I think that there needs to be like the two stories that I'm trying to tell in DeFi right now are really the first one, financial tooling for everyone that is as good or better than the alternatives, and then really the second story is one that is far more rational for just traditional metrics in Web 2, understanding that if you want people to convert, unless they have no alternative in these third world countries, right? For first world countries, you need to provide a better user experience, a 10 times better user experience to convert that user than any alternatives. And DeFi actually does have the opportunity to do that. There are fundamental building blocks in terms of the ability to rehypothecate, as in use the same position over and over within the same transaction, that are just impossible to replicate in traditional finance. So, very quickly you'll find that you are able to do things that are simply just 10 times better. And really this is the story that I think needs to be told.
10x improvements. That's always a winning value proposition, especially as we think about kind of non-US EU markets as well, where a lot of finance is inaccessible.
Exactly, yeah.
All right. I think there are some questions about a resource guide or plain language article you would recommend that defines DeFi. Well, join us for week number 1 with Dan Robinson next week. I think that's one resource, but do you all have any resources that you'd recommend?
It's a tough one, right? Like, depending who you talk to, they're going to say different things. Part of the Gitcoin ethos is like, is the financial tooling for all thing? Some people think it's just like making centralized lending easier, right? Like it's all difficult. I think the most important thing is getting into it and defining it for you, right? The second you start identifying where your pain points are, then you can identify, okay, what can really DeFi do and what really matters, because it's only the things that are tangible at the end of the day that will really matter. Danny, were you going to say something?
Yeah. So I think that part of this, and I'll give like some specific resources that I think are like, good primers. But Julian, I think you nailed on the head is you kind of have to like lean in a little bit and start to kind of make sense of things. And I think as you learn about DeFi, you can kind of stop at any point in the journey. Because I do think sometimes the things that, right, I think Andy said this in an earlier podcast with you, Shawn, is right, that the financial systems or primitives that are more complicated sometimes are the ones that maybe aren't, sometimes can be some of the ones that are frankly like more Ponzi-esque, right, or not less sustainable. So I think you can kind of stop at any point in the journey, and once you kind of started to understand AMMs, you kind of do really understand decentralized finance at its core. And I think Dan Robinson's chat in session 1 will highlight that, right? But some specific resources or some people that I just think are quality that exist either within Kernel or even outside of Kernel, right? I personally like DeFi Dad and think that he as a YouTuber is a good, decent place to start. I think Nat Ellison has a really good like DeFi 101 and 102 article that are really good places to start. He also has like an orientation and a course. I'm not necessarily saying go buy that, right? But I also think as well, right, right? If you really want to learn about DeFi, sometimes it's also helpful to contribute in a way or develop, right? And this is a kind of a selfless plug, is like, right, I think that's one of the elements or reasons for the wiki that we aim to create for Kernel. And we already have a really good starting place for this. Taught a DeFi analytics tool, and we'll look to continue to kind of build a contributor base of individuals, so whoever asked this question, like, right, we'll kind of invite you to kind of help learn about DeFi and then document that learning and help onboard the next group of individuals to DeFi, really trying to make it not only simple, but then even also cover some of the more nuanced topics that may interest you or others within our community.
I think there's a question about where is the wiki. We will be creating the wiki collaboratively together, this guild, right? This cohort, actually. So I think there's also opportunities to, if you're into audio and video formats, to publish them through the Kernel DeFi podcast. I think that's something I've been encouraging folks to do, if it's research on tokens and things like that. So what we want to do is be a credibly neutral, not authoritative, but trusted source of information in the DeFi world. And I think Kernel Fellows, along with our speakers and everyone in the guild, can help make that true. I realize we're getting to the top of the hour, but we did have some market commentary planned. If you all wanted to go on for another, let's say, a few minutes or so. Yeah, what are some of like a lightning round here? What do we want to talk? Like there was something that happened this week that started with the M. Can you guys remind me exactly what happened?
Merge timbers, is that what they're calling it?
Merge timbers?
Something with pandas, right?
Yeah, pandas connecting and exploding. I think might have been one of the films my son watches. But
Kung Fu Panda, right? That it's a Kung Fu Panda release, right? Yeah.
Would you guys did you guys stay up for the merge itself? Were you guys there at the time?
No? I did. It was easier on the West Coast, right? Because it was around midnight West Coast time.
Yeah. What'd you think of the merge song by the Song of Day guy?
It was good. It went a little long.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
I could dump a Gatorade barrel full of ice water on the merge. I think Gensler's comments right after, or the timing of his comments about, I forget specifically what he said, but kind of inferring that now POS-based tokens or chains will be securities. These
arguments, I'm going to be honest, the SEC has a long dick, okay, and they can do a lot with it. But the bottom line is that legally, a lot of these things, if they're actually challenged in court, won't end up holding up. I know to be a security, you don't explicitly have to be hit by one of the Howey test requirements, but you can look at the Howey test and usually identify like very specific avenues that say this is not a security, And in the case of ETH or
Julian,
any of these other things, sorry.
No, I was just gonna. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there.
Yeah,
I thought you were taking a pause, but I agree with you. I think that now, I think of the Howey test. It certainly is meant to be like there is a binary: are you or are you not a security? But I think you can even look at it within that though. Like there's a spectrum, and let's say like once you get past like 7 or something, right? Like it is probably a security. I think now ETH, now that it is more of is moved from a proof of work, right? Similar to how Bitcoin mines, just for those who maybe don't know what that means. Right, it is now moving to proof of stake to validate transactions and run nodes. So it's a different mechanism that's a lot more sustainable. It comes with a lot of benefits and also helps enable longer term scalability things. And anybody can jump in there and explain the technical stuff because that's not my world. But I think it does look more like a security, but I still don't think it crosses that threshold. And I also think, frankly, that to your point, Julian, it's not only that can be a little heavy-handed, but the SEC and just like commentary, but they move so slowly. I don't really know, and I don't really know what even would be a regulatory action they can do to like shut down ETH or really enforce it is a security. I just don't see them moving that fast to do it. I don't think it passes the Howey test. I think it more resembles a security now on the spectrum, but I don't think it ultimately is a security, personally. It's not, right? Today it's not, so it's not.
Yeah, I mean, I think the bigger regulatory battle is between
But
the
this is
CFTC
not
and
us.
the CFTC and the SEC are fighting it out. Like, who gets to regulate crypto, right? So I think to date, Bitcoin and Ethereum have been labeled as commodities, and that's under the purview of the CFTC. Everything else is starting to be classified as a security either by enforcement action, as we saw with SEC on the Coinbase insider trading case, where they classified a few of those tokens, which basically people had inside info on and traded on, were classified as securities. We also saw that case against the former head of product of OpenSea, and I believe that was from the SEC, if I remember correctly. And the charge wasn't exactly insider trading, but it was something along those lines, which implied that action. So we're starting to see regulatory bodies become a lot more active in that area. I think a really great commentator on the space from the TradFi world is Matt Levine from Bloomberg. If any of you follow him, definitely recommend signing up for his mailing list. And he actually has been talking about crypto a lot recently. Had a great podcast with SBF, actually talking about, he was asking about SBF, where this value and kind of a lot of these DeFi tokens come from. And it had to do with a lot of money in boxes, but we will we will explore some of those concepts in the project as well during the guild.
Just wrapping up, so this final thought on the legal side is that realistically, you need to, and again, Marc is the one that should touch on this, not me, during the guild. You need to think about things when you start a project, whether it deserves to have a token, and if it deserves to have a token, what its specific, not just utility, but what it does. If people are going to be getting any capital, if it's just going to be governance, there's potentially issues. If there's going to be any fees generated, you have to make sure that they're doing something for those fees, right? The defense on ETH's end is that as a validator, you are actually doing something, right? It's not just you're sitting there and passively earning money. You're actually doing something for it. And that's really the defense that will continue to be there. So I don't know. That's another thing for another time, I suppose.
Yeah, and the narrative has really shifted from miners to validators now, right? And I think there's a lot of talk about how centralized is validation, especially with like Lido and others being a kind of aggregator of validators, and then many people running validators on centralized cloud services like AWS. So
yeah,
very interesting kind of comments here and there, but I don't think we anticipate too much action in the short term.
awesome.
Yeah, and maybe a really, really quick lightning round. If each of you had something you're super excited about in DeFi now, what's hot now? Like, what are you guys excited about?
I'll shill. So obviously, really big fan of everything going on top of ETH2. I think there can be a lot built there. We're also building something at Swivel. I'm shilling that alpha on Illuminate, where we're guaranteeing people the best yields in DeFi on top of fixed rates. And then there's a lot of things you can build on top of that. Specifically, the ability to underwrite options with bonds, right? This is kind of one of those use cases I was talking about earlier, where you can do things that aren't really possible traditionally. You can take a position that is going to be worth $10,000, let's say, on December 30th, and you can underwrite a put with it that matures on December 30th as well. Effectively double dipping on your yield, and again, like doing things you can't do in TradFi. Good luck getting a bank to let you underwrite anything ever, not to mention unless you have a portfolio that's like $100 million, with bonds at least, that is. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm excited about.
Greg, you want to go?
Yeah, I'm happy to go. Something really, really kind of specific and maybe not that apparent. There's a lot of this movement in the builder space of data standardization, making data more accessible, usable, and this for me is of course is tied into the project that I'm building. But it's important because I always had this dream that, well, blockchain in theory, if all kind of information moves to a blockchain and you're able to mine that and make that useful, then hey, it's like, almost like Google's mission in a way. It's like making information universally accessible. So I'm just really excited that these projects are going on, and many times open source projects, so that we can help the space kind of mature to a state where, your grandmas and grandpas and whoever else can participate without so much worry. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah, I'll
Go ahead, Danny.
I'll just kind of, I'll kind of just jump in. I think one thing, Greg, you hit the nail on the head. I think I was going to say data. Julian, what you're building sounds super cool. Makes a lot of sense. You're right about the underwriting stuff. I'll save the NFT finalization, which is something I think is super exciting about, like, using those differently. I think one thing that, especially this week, I've been thinking a lot about, and Vitalik Buterin said it, is I'm really curious to see in the next few months, and especially in what is probably more of a winter, like what institutional capital potentially comes in that has maybe been on the sidelines because of sustainability concerns, right? And because maybe potentially it's also been kind of cost prohibitive, a little bit too hyped, right? I think that there's going to be a lot of really cool stuff that's built, especially now that ETH is much more sustainable. And I could even see a world where a lot of the intellectual capital that might be on other chains or has been on other projects kind of come to that Ethereum ecosystem, or EVMs, protocols that are compatible with Ethereum, to effectively just do some really cool stuff, and that really kind of get the funding and the partnerships that's necessary to really just kind of, I think, make Web3 and DeFi much more ubiquitous and commonly used. So that more of a theme though than a protocol. Drew, you have anything?
Yeah. So just continuing your idea about coming up capital, I think the fundamental changes in the underlying primitive, the architecture of AMMs, because right now AMMs face a lot of issues about the inefficiency of swaps. You have recently protocols like Morpho coming with peer-to lending, pool lending protocols. That's also an kind of new architecture which is currently being used by NASDAQ and other, let's say, stock exchanges. Apart from that, as Greg said about how data can be put on chain. So I'm also working on a standard to put as much on-chain metadata with LP tokens, so they can be converted to bonds and other financial derivatives. And for me, that will be a great way out for DeFi.
And Drew, we actually have you and a few others from your team on the podcast next week, right?
Yes, indeed. I will explain there about what we are working.
So excited to explore that topic further. I'll add what I'm excited about beyond what you all mentioned is the innovation within game economies. How do we go beyond GameFi? And I'd really be interested to see how some of these Web 2 pioneers can bring new concepts into that world. If we look at Gabriel Ladon, I'm probably mispronouncing his name, but the former Machine Zone CEO, coming out with free-to-own NFTs, and everybody was kind of saying, "Oh, free-to-own, what does that mean?" But he was able to kind of take the market by storm with his project Daigaku, which is the kind of first iteration of Limit Break. So excited to see where DeFi can help with game economies. With that, I wanted to wrap us up and say thank you all for joining, especially the folks who dialed in, and hope you all have a great weekend.
Nice background music. As always, thanks for having us.
All right. Well, thank you all. Have a good one, and we will see you in the DeFi Guild next week for the Kernel fellows listening.